Hi, welcome to another edition of Antique Radio Archaeology. Today we're going to begin a series on the Chelsea Super 5 line of radios. Now, what's interesting about this line is they were produced in three different model years, 1925, 1926, and 1927. Each model year was a distinctively different radio. And to add to the confusion, a lot of these radios were actually introduced in advertisements earlier in the year, kind of like an automobile. When you see that a new model year for an automobile, a lot of times they start selling those things in like October of the year before. Well, the same kind of holds true with a lot of radios. And it definitely happened with the Chelsea line of radios. 1925 was a version that was obviously the first one. They had two variations of that radio, which was an early version and a later version. The early version had the tube plate mounted to the base of the cabinet, while the later version raised it up on blocks and put the transformers underneath. The early version used the Model 50 transformers, the later version used the Model 51. Now, on top of that, this was a kind of a progression going towards the 1926 model year. They also introduced a wooden faceplate. Now, the first two versions of the 1925 Super 5 had Bakelite faceplates. So the one that had the wooden faceplate, I believe, was a precursor to the 1926 model, which had a metal chassis, and because of the raised plate, that kind of blends in with how they would organize the components and everything in that model. See, now the early 1925 versions all had terminals on the back. The 1926 went to a wiring harness. So there was that difference. And within the 1926 model year, I think the first version they introduced had the same cabinet as the 1925, but there's a problem with that cabinet. With the metal chassis, you can't pull the faceplate out of there with the chassis attached. So what happened was they wound up revising that cabinet so that you can just screw the faceplate into the cabinet instead of having those two strips on the side that the faceplate slid into. So the only way I can even imagine them assembling it is they would have to put it in the cabinet and then put the strips on it on each side. So, but it was corrected, and the rest of the model year, I believe, had the screw-on faceplate. Now in 1927 there was dramatic change in the cabinet style. They went to a decorative veneer cabinet with inlaid veneer. They also went to the tuning dials that had the windows on the front, and you had smaller knobs. And there were also, like the other model years, there were variations of it. You had the wooden version, which has the decorative veneer and the slanted plate, and there was also a metal version that is more of a boxy frame as far as cabinet is concerned, and it had a metal faceplate that matched the color of the chassis itself. Now the chassis went to a darker, more brown color from the earlier reddish color of the 1926 Super 5s. So that's pretty much the Chelsea Super 5 line. Now there may be variations I don't even know of, because they seem to be experimenting and kind of playing it as they went, so to speak, with components and things like that. Now this very first part, we're going to start with the early version. Now, a couple things about the early version. There's a couple of different types of rheostats used. You had the round-shaped rheostat, you had the flat rheostat. So, depending on what components they used, kind of determine what your particular model may or may not have. I mean, you may look at your model and say, wow, that doesn't look like the one I'm seeing in the video. Well, that's because they used whatever parts were available, and a lot of times those parts were slightly different. So you will see those variations as we go along. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started on the 1925 early version Chelsea Super 5. So here's the earlier version. Of course, there's some condition issues with the case. I mean, this finish on here is just shot, so this is going to require a complete sanding and refinishing. The plate, however, is in really good shape. That is going to need some minor cleanup, as well as the dials, so I'm real happy about that. This plate here is going to be easily cleaned and reutilized. This one does not have a catch on the door. On the back, we have the terminals here, and for some reason they added a terminal. I think that was added by somebody for some reason. It doesn't belong there. I need to take that out and seal up that hole because that is not part of the original radio. And here are the antenna terminals. So let's go ahead and see if I can pull this out of here. Alright, there we go. Okay, so things are still attached here. Okay, everything looks good here. As you can see, there's those curved rheostats that I talked about earlier. This does not have the wraparound wipers, though. It has a flat one, which is interesting. The coils all look to be in good shape. The capacitors look to be in good shape. So I'm real happy with everything that's going on this faceplate. Now back here, obviously I have the wrong transformer there. And it's missing the other transformer, which is fine. I have transformers for this. So I'm definitely going to be replacing that transformer. And basically cleaning this one up. I think this one will be my easiest one to deal with, even though there are some condition issues with the case in here. Okay, so I'm done cleaning up the parts for the early version. Relatively simple, just tedious. But I am going to leave all this wiring on for now. I'm going to probably be replacing a lot of it as I install it, but I just want to leave it there so that it's easier to figure out what goes where. And that's pretty much it. I think we're ready to start putting this thing back together. Okay, so I'm going to begin the chassis assembly, and what I refer to as chassis is really this board right here is going to mount all the tube sockets and transformers onto it. So I did pick up 2 transformers for this, and we're ready to go. The transformers, the secondary needs to be facing that direction. We're going to come through the bottom with the transformer screws. So that completes the chassis, which includes all the filament buses, my A- ground bus over here, my little grid buses, and my plate-to-plate connection here on that particular tube and transformer. One last thing I want to do before mounting this is right where the screws are going to go in to the cabinet, let's put on some rubber legs here. There. Okay. That kind of sucked. Screw broke. And there's enough to get it out. Good. Alright, just need to find another screw that size. Okay, found a replacement screw. It's kind of comical that that one broke because it really, I didn't put a lot of torque on it at all. I barely touched it, but you can see that it's kind of rusted through there, so it must have had a crack in it. And maybe the sonic wash kind of brought it to its end. Alright. of the issues I have here is that bus bar right there. It's supposed to go across these two terminals and come down and hit that plate, but obviously it's been cut off or broken, bent up, who knows what happened over the years. So I went ahead and fashioned a new one, and go ahead and solder that in real quick. Okay, so all the connecting wires are ready to go. I just need to go ahead and get the case ready, and we can drop this in the case and start hooking everything up. So as always, I went ahead and did a component layout and a schematic for this particular model. And I'm going to just go through it real quick to show you how this thing operates. Now, this wire here is pretty much the ground bus. And that consists of this wire here, which comes up here. It hits all these filaments, the filament side of those transformers, and the filaments on 1 and 2. This wire comes up here. It hits these triangular plates behind the variable capacitors. Along with that bar there, you got your little capacitors here coming off of it. And obviously here your VR2s coming up and hitting it as well. And we can see that here. Here's the ground bus, and obviously when you've got your VR2 there, here's all those filaments on 1 and 2, those capacitors right there, and we also have the filament side of these transformers. And it also hits the bottom of the antenna coil. So let's talk about how this thing operates. You've got your signal coming into the antenna. It hits the first sets of coils here. The bottom part of the L1 has VC1 capacitor, variable capacitor, that creates a tank circuit, helps tune down that frequency to the grid. It comes in here, hits L2, which goes to your B plus 90, and also it's tied to L3, which is your also B plus 90 going to the plate of V2. So that's where it's getting its power. It goes ahead and passes over to here into the tank circuit for V2, which consists of VC2 and the bottom coil there. And that passes that RF signal over to here, another tank circuit. So this basically fine tunes it all the way down to where we're getting ready to hit the grid leak. Now once it hits the grid leak, passes here, you got your filter capacitor C1, gets rid of the RF. So all that's left is the audio going to T1. T1 passes it to V4. V4 goes ahead and sends part of it to the phone jack. And you got 90 volts hitting the bottom side of that phone jack. And you're able to go ahead and pick up off the first amplifier for headphones. It also passes it to the grid of V5. And V5 is your loudspeaker. And of course you got your 90 volts hitting the bottom of that loudspeaker. So that's pretty much the operation. It's a TRF receiver. It's the first TRF receiver Chelsea ever made. And your on-off switch, your A plus B minus, hits right here. It goes through the filament of V3, and then it hits V4 and V5. Now what's interesting about this A plus is it hits those 3 tubes and then comes over and hits the variable resistor VR1, which controls these 2 tubes. So basically these two rheostats are actually working in conjunction with each other to give you your filament voltages for all 5 tubes. And that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and fire this thing up and see how she sounds. Okay, so I went ahead and found some 301 tubes that I popped in there. Have my battery eliminator turned on. That's good, I got noise. My local station's around 30 on the dials, so let's see if we can find it. Oh, there we go.
Tommy and Jenny on a couple of their better-known oldies. Johnny Mercer's latest, a real classic by Larry Clinton and Billy Wayne. That's a lot of music to cram into a little bit of time, so let's get on the phone and enjoy these two.
So that concludes today's episode. The next episode will be on the 1925 Super 5 later version. Happy restorations, everybody. Hope to see you again next video. Goodbye.